The Indo-Pacific region is now at the heart of global geopolitics, because it's one of the most strategically important areas in the world. It's crisscrossed by vital sea routes, packed with economic activity, and plays a huge role in shaping global alliances. Major powers like the US, China, India, Japan, and Australia are all deeply involved here, vying for influence, forming partnerships, and shifting the balance of global power. For the United States, the main focus has been clear: push back against China's growing dominance by building a web of allies and strategic partnerships around the region. This video breaks down how America's strategy in the Indo-Pacific has evolved over time. The region's many straits and waterways make it critical for international trade. But it's not just about economics, it's also become a platform for global power plays and military positioning. Since around 2009, the US has steadily turned its attention toward the Indo-Pacific. It all started under the Obama administration with the so-called pivot to Asia. Then came Trump, who rebranded the region as the Indo-Pacific and shifted focus even more. Under Biden, the strategy has deepened, centered on working with allies and forming stronger multilateral coalitions. What's driving all this? The rise of regional powers, especially China and India, and their increasing control over key shipping lanes and trade routes. The idea of the Indo-Pacific itself signals a big shift. It's not just a rebrand, it's a broader concept that moves beyond the old Asia-Pacific model. This shift has been championed by countries like Japan and India and embraced by the US as a way to hold onto global leadership while strengthening ties with regional players. The idea of the Asia-Pacific region has been evolving since the 1960s. Back then, Japanese Foreign Minister Takeo Miki described it as a new kind of geopolitical concept, one that wasn't fixed but constantly shifting. At its core were countries in Northeast and Southeast Asia, like China, Korea, Japan, and the ASEAN nations. But the outer circle of countries involved kept changing, making the Asia-Pacific more of a living, adaptable idea than a clearly defined region. In the 1960s and 70s, Australia, Japan, and the United States began shaping this Asia-Pacific concept to connect East Asia with the broader Pacific region. However, the term Asia-Pacific mostly emphasized Asia while somewhat separating the Pacific. That's why some see East Asia as more geographically accurate, even though it still includes Pacific powers like Australia and the US. And while the term Far East has historical use, it's considered outdated and Eurocentric today. The US used the term Asia-Pacific to justify and legitimize its deep involvement in East Asian affairs. Even though America isn't technically an Asian power, its significant presence and influence in the region have made it a key part of the Asia-Pacific framework. In fact, American backing has been one of the main reasons this concept took shape and gained momentum. Other Western nations like New Zealand, Canada, and Australia, though not the creators of the term, have supported it for similar reasons. Japan, too, has historically backed the idea and wants to keep promoting regional cooperation. If tensions were to rise between the US and Japan, this broader regional framework could help smooth things over. Now, the term Pacific region isn't meant specifically for Asia. Instead, it describes a broader region that actually helps separate Western countries from East Asia. From 1981 to 2003, Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad was a strong supporter of this idea. Even though Malaysia is part of APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, founded in 1989, Mahathir preferred a more focused group, like the East Asian Economic Group. After the Asian financial crisis in 1997, a new partnership emerged, ASEAN Plus 3, which brought together South Korea, Japan, and China. This added new energy to East Asian regional efforts. Later, in December 2005, leaders met in Kuala Lumpur and launched the East Asia Summit, expanding this regional vision even further. So, when we talk about the Asia-Pacific region today, we're referring to a wide group, East Asia, plus Western Pacific countries like New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and the US. East Asia itself is often split into two areas, Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia. Northeast Asia includes countries like Mongolia, Russia, North and South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and China. Southeast Asia includes Vietnam, East Timor, Thailand, Singapore, the Philippines, Malaysia, Laos, Indonesia, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Brunei. All of these, except East Timor, are part of ASEAN. Australia and New Zealand are the two major powers in the South Pacific, and they are connected to a group of island nations like Fiji and Papua New Guinea through the Pacific Islands Forum, one of the most important regional platforms. Some definitions of the Asia-Pacific even go further to include not just the US and Canada, but Latin American countries along the Pacific coast, like Chile, Peru, and Mexico, which are also members of APEC. And India. While not traditionally considered part of Asia-Pacific, it now has growing connections to the region. That's where the Indo-Pacific concept comes in. The Indo-Pacific connects the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, stretching all the way from East Africa to the Pacific coasts of the Americas, and from the Bering Strait down to the Southern Ocean. It reflects how trade, people, and influence are flowing more and more across South and East Asia. The United States' global role became truly visible during World War II. Fighting alongside the Allied forces, the US took on the Axis powers led by Germany. Even before the war officially ended, the US and its allies were already planning a new global strategy, one that would shape political, military, security, and economic systems for the post-war world. This new strategy was built on two key pillars: creating strong military and security alliances, signing the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, which laid the foundation for major institutions that would manage the global economy. This was the starting point of America's long-term strategic involvement in the Asia-Pacific region. After the war, the US focused on strengthening its global leadership. Its foreign policy took a broad and ambitious approach, and Asia-Pacific played a major role in it, especially as tensions with the Soviet Union intensified. The post-war world was increasingly divided into two rival camps, the liberal bloc led by the United States, and the socialist bloc led by the Soviet Union. Both sides tried to bring other nations into their networks of alliances, militarily, politically, and economically. And among the regions where this rivalry was most intense, the Asia-Pacific. The US saw this region as a major strategic priority, echoing the ideas of political strategist Zbigniew Brzezinski, who viewed it as essential to global stability and power projection. The late 1940s marked the start of America's deep involvement in the Pacific. After World War II, the US didn't just win the war, it emerged as a dominant global power. That dominance was guided by two main strategies: the containment of Soviet influence, essentially stopping the spread of communism; promoting economic recovery and cooperation, based on the idea of opening global markets. The post-war reality pushed the US to play a major role in shaping the Asia-Pacific. Its strategy focused on three main goals. 1. Preventing any single power from dominating the region. 2. Keeping the region open for American trade and investment. 3. Spreading democratic values and systems of governance. Importantly, the Asia-Pacific strategy wasn't a standalone effort, it was part of a larger global strategy. The containment policy was central. It aimed to curb Soviet influence and expand America's presence. It also gave the US a reason to boost its military power in the region and strengthen relationships, both one-on-one and through multilateral alliances. The containment strategy was the first big step in establishing the US as a dominant player in regional affairs. As the Cold War escalated, America's presence in the region became even more visible. Here's how that looked in practice. A strong military presence in countries like Japan, South Korea, and Thailand. Formation of bilateral alliances with Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Thailand. Creation of multilateral defense pacts, including ANZUS, linking the US, Australia, and New Zealand. Support for the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, SEATO, aimed at regional security. One of the most significant events was the Communist Revolution in China in 1949. China became a communist state and an ally of the Soviet Union. This alarmed neighboring countries and shifted regional power dynamics. To rally more regional countries into the capitalist camp, the US ramped up its diplomatic efforts. A notable example was the Rusk-Thanet Agreement signed with Thailand in 1962. This agreement committed the US to defend Thailand and even help with its military budget, with the aim of keeping Thailand firmly in the Western Bloc and preventing communist influence. As a result, Thailand and the Philippines became active supporters of US efforts in the Vietnam War, even sending troops to assist US forces in South Vietnam in 1965. Although the US had long viewed China as a direct threat, things began to shift in the 1970s. Changing global dynamics forced the US to reevaluate its priorities. Suddenly, China was seen not as an enemy, but as a strategic necessity in balancing power in the region, especially against the Soviet Union. Looking at all these developments, it's clear that the US played a central role in shaping the Asia-Pacific during the Cold War. Its main goal was to stop the spread of communism, a system it saw as not just an ideological threat, but a political and economic one as well. To achieve this, the US used a full range of foreign policy tools, alliances, military bases, security treaties, diplomacy, and direct military intervention. All of it was aimed at making sure America remained a dominant and influential force in the region. So, after the Cold War ended, America shifted gears. With the Soviet Union out of the picture, the US was suddenly the only superpower left standing, and it made sure everyone knew it. Washington started pushing the idea of a new world order, where it would take the lead in shaping global politics. Now, this wasn't just about showing off power. The US backed its influence with serious military strength, economic clout, and cutting-edge tech. While it made some adjustments to its military presence around the world, the core idea was clear: stay central to global affairs, especially in Asia. In this new world, the US aimed to create a stable international system that aligned with its interests and values, things like democracy, open markets, and security. It tried to blend all of these into a single, integrated strategy that would keep America at the top of the global order. Before this shift, during the Cold War, US policy in the Asia-Pacific was all about containing communism, mainly from China and the Soviet Union. But after the Cold War ended, that strategy was no longer a good fit. American policymakers found themselves at a bit of a crossroads, trying to figure out what comes next. The new focus became preserving the liberal international order, basically, the rules-based system the US helped create after World War II, and stopping any new superpower, like China, from challenging that system. At the same time, the US doubled down on building strong economic partnerships in the region. In fact, one of the early signs of this shift came in 1992, when President Bill Clinton proposed the idea of a new Pacific community. The idea was to promote economic cooperation, mutual development, and shared values with countries across the region. This wasn't just talk. America really leaned into this goal in the post-Cold War years. This phase of US strategy emphasized prosperity, shared democratic ideals, and peace. Washington encouraged the creation of new regional institutions to prevent conflict and promote cooperation, especially through bilateral partnerships, meaning close, one-on-one relationships between countries. And over time, this grew into what some called a kind of complementary security community. The idea was that countries in the region, especially US allies, would stay connected through a web of agreements and shared interests. The US also deepened its ties with longtime allies like Japan and Australia, but its strategy didn't stop there. As China's influence began to grow, the US expanded its network even further, building new security partnerships with countries like Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, and most notably, India. This wasn't just about friendship, it was part of a bigger geopolitical strategy to balance China's rise and ensure that the Indo-Pacific remained free and open. But then came a major global shock: 9/11. The terrorist attacks in 2001 shook American foreign policy to its core, not just in the Middle East, but worldwide. Suddenly, terrorism was the #1 threat, and the US had to rethink its priorities all over again. In response, America launched military campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also turned its focus towards Southeast Asia, a region where the risk of extremist ideologies taking root was growing. This wasn't random. Certain factors, like poverty, political instability, and local grievances, created ideal conditions for radical groups to emerge. In countries like the Philippines and Indonesia, extremist Islamic groups started becoming a serious threat, not just to those countries but to regional peace and security as a whole. So, the US expanded its counterterrorism efforts and partnerships in that part of the world too. During the Obama and Trump administrations, the United States implemented a strategic pivot toward the Indo-Pacific region, focusing on strengthening alliances with regional partners to establish a strategic counterbalance against China's growing hegemonic influence. This reorientation emphasized enhanced military presence and diplomatic engagement in the region. Following Barack Obama's inauguration in early 2009, the United States initiated a substantial reorientation of its foreign policy through the East Asia Strategy. This strategic shift redirected American attention from Europe and the Middle East toward South and East Asia, with particular emphasis on China's neighboring states. The strategy encompassed strengthening bilateral security alliances, fostering relationships with emerging powers including China, engaging with regional multilateral institutions, expanding economic partnerships, maintaining comprehensive military presence, and promoting democratic governance and human rights. In a pivotal foreign policy article from 2011, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton stated, "To position ourselves to sustain our leadership, secure our interests, and advance our values, we must be smart and systematic about where we invest time and energy over the next decade." Therefore, one of America's most important tasks in the coming decade will be to substantially increase investment, diplomatic, economic, strategic, and otherwise, in the Indo-Pacific region. She further emphasized the region's significance as a driver of global politics, describing its expanse from India to America's western shores, encompassing both the Pacific and Indian Oceans, noting its strategic maritime importance and role as home to major economic drivers and emerging powers like China, India, and Indonesia, for example, strengthening U.S. relations with Japan and South Korea, increasing military presence in the Philippines and Australia, and developing relations with Vietnam and India. Clinton's diplomatic initiative included unprecedented visits to Japan, Indonesia, South Korea, and China, marking a departure from her predecessor's focus on Europe and the Middle East. These visits symbolized America's return to Asia and the international arena. In Hard Choices, Clinton emphasized the imperative of expanding Sino-American relations and prioritizing Indo-Pacific diplomacy. The Obama administration formalized this approach through several key policy documents, including the National Security Strategy, 2010, the New Defense Strategy, 2012, the Defense Review, and an updated National Security Strategy. The American Pivot to Asia strategy evolved through two distinct phases during the Obama administration. Phase 1, 2011 to 2012. This phase focused on military initiatives and maintaining force levels in the Indo-Pacific region, despite significant budgetary allocations. Key American moves included intensifying military presence in the northern and western parts of the region, implementing flexibility principles in military roles rather than establishing permanent bases. Signing the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, EDCA, with the Philippines in 2014 to strengthen security partnership, enabling increased U.S. military presence, training Philippine forces, and conducting joint exercises. Within this framework, America granted $100 million to the Philippines and $50 million to Indonesia in 2002 for counterterrorism efforts. That same year, ASEAN and the U.S. signed a joint counterterrorism agreement, working on defense agreements with Japan and a 10-year military presence agreement with the Philippines, aiming to contain China's position while strengthening U.S. regional hegemony. The U.S. also criticized China's industrial island construction in the South China Sea. Phase 2, post-2012. Following criticism of military emphasis, the U.S. administration shifted focus to economic diplomatic initiatives in late 2012, developing closer relations with China to reduce tensions. This led to proposals for establishing a fair, free, and transparent trade system based on formal principles, resulting in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. The Obama administration's Indo-Pacific strategy aimed to restore balance to U.S. defense policy globally. This strategy received enhanced economic focus and dynamism, particularly through reducing hegemony while increasing commitments to the Asia-Pacific region. Under this policy, the Obama administration sought to reconcentrate its diplomatic and military role toward the region, reflecting the shift in global strategic and economic center of gravity. This meant the United States intended to focus more on a region that had gained increased importance following the 2008 global economic crisis. Upon Donald Trump's election victory in 2017, the United States withdrew from several international agreements, including the Paris Climate Agreement, Iran Nuclear Deal, JCPOA, Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, and Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, reflecting the view that America should no longer bear global burdens and should prioritize self-interest. Regarding China containment, Trump adopted a different strategy, initiating a trade war in 2018 which continued in his second term. Analysis of Trump's speeches and national security strategy indicated his administration's focus on maintaining American security and hegemony, suggesting that the best way to contain China's growth was to move away from liberal and globalization principles. Analysis of U.S. strategy in the Indo-Pacific region reveals a significant shift between the Obama and Trump administrations. This major change fundamentally stems from their different leadership styles. Obama pursued a cautious and calculating foreign policy approach, while Trump adopted a distinctly different approach. This stylistic difference led to practical shifts in several aspects. The Trump administration introduced an unpredictable element into foreign policy, intensified military operations in the South China Sea, openly designated China as a revisionist power, and initiated an unprecedented trade war. Although this shift appears to have altered the trajectory of U.S.-China relations, both administrations fundamentally shared the goal of maintaining American hegemony in the Indo-Pacific region, albeit through different approaches. Trump raised the "America First" slogan and criticized previous administrations. His first major action was withdrawing from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, in 2017, which he described as the worst agreement. This withdrawal occurred during significant American economic decline, with Trump attributing blame to U.S. allies. The negative impacts included difficulties in global goods distribution. China's gains through creating alternative trade and investment realities. A year after that withdrawal in 2018, the remaining 11 nations, under Japan's leadership, decided to forge a new agreement without the United States, renaming it the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, as an alternative to America's retreat from the agreements. However, Donald Trump's November 2017 visit to Japan, South Korea, China, and the Philippines transformed his aggressive stance into a more conciliatory approach, particularly during discussions regarding the significance of America's East-oriented policy pursued by previous administrations, especially President Obama. He also emphasized that the United States should not adopt an isolationist policy in the region, marking a subtle shift towards relying on the Indo-Pacific concept rather than the Asia-Pacific framework. The employment of this concept became more evident as a consequence of Trump's visits to Asian nations. Australia swiftly responded to this proposal, culminating in the incorporation of the Defense White Paper, Australia in the Asian Century. This white paper, issued by the Australian Department of Defence, aimed to engage Southeast Asian nations in aligning their roles with this concept. Subsequently, during a significant address at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, SISE, Indonesia's foreign minister presented their vision for the Indo-Pacific concept, proposing several international and regional policy measures centered on building bilateral trust, peaceful conflict resolution, and strengthening collective security. This trajectory expanded during Joe Biden's presidency, as evidenced by two decisive actions taken within just 30 days, from August 15 to September 15, 2021. Biden continued Trump's policies while implementing his own approach. The timing of these decisions proved somewhat surprising to many nations globally, including NATO allies. The first decision involved the rapid U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan, announced on August 15, 2021, and executed within 2 weeks. The second decision, made on September 15, 2021, established a new strategic security alliance in the Indo-Pacific region known as the AUKUS Alliance, comprising the United States, Britain, and Australia, an acronym derived from the initial letters of the member states. The United States has established multiple alliances to counter the growth of certain nations in the Indo-Pacific region, aiming to maintain the balance of power and strengthen multilateral security relations in this strategic area. The primary objective is to create a robust network of allies to counter Chinese influence and protect their economic and military interests. Currently, from a geopolitical perspective, America is primarily viewed as an Atlantic-centered nation on European maps. However, with Asia's continental power emergence, this perception is shifting. As stated in the Indo-Pacific Strategy document, 2019, America is and has historically been a Pacific nation, possessing 5 Pacific states: Hawaii, California, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska, along with the Northern Mariana Islands, Wake, American Samoa, and Guam. This trajectory expanded during Joe Biden's presidency, as evidenced by 2 decisive actions taken within just 30 days, from August 15 to September 15, 2021. In the framework of its Indo-Pacific strategy, the United States continues to expand its presence in the Pacific Ocean, taking steps against emerging powers like China through economic and military cooperation with regional allies. Mark Alexander Milley, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, during his 2019 visit to Japan, characterized China as a strategic competitor and emphasized the importance of maintaining alliances with Australia, South Korea, and Japan. This emphasis on the Indo-Pacific region was not limited to the Trump administration. His successor, Joe Biden, maintained this focus. However, instead of Trump's "America First" rhetoric, Biden sought to achieve greater cooperation and partnership regarding the region. In this context, during U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's 2021 visit to India, he emphasized issues of expanding defense relations. Subsequently, the primary agenda of U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's visit to Japan in the same year demonstrated that necessary measures should be taken against China's aggressive posture. Since the mid-19th century, America has viewed itself as a leading Pacific nation. This region's significance is far greater today, as economic growth has become a geopolitical competition point between the United States and China, making the Indo-Pacific region central to U.S. defense policy. Intelligence and military resource gaps in the Indo-Pacific region prompted America to emphasize military and security alliances and partnerships to maintain its hegemony in this sensitive region. The American role in the Indo-Pacific region relies on constructive engagement policy, based on military, security, and economic principles. In this context, several factors have increased this region's importance to America, most notably. The United States is historically and geographically a Pacific nation. A significant portion of regional nations desire continued American presence, stemming from several key regional perceptions. Regional countries desire to activate economic relations with the American market. The positive factor in establishing regional stability and security. Preventing political and security vacuums that could lead to rivalry and competition among major regional powers. Several American allies in the region rely on the U.S. for regional security matters. The Five Eyes Agreement, a highly integrated intelligence-sharing partnership encompassing the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, originating from the 1946 AUKUS Agreement. During the Cold War, it focused on intelligence operations targeting Soviet activities. Over time, the alliance evolved to address various global security challenges, including terrorism, cyber threats, and advanced technology. In the Indo-Pacific region, Five Eyes currently plays a crucial role in monitoring Chinese military activities, countering cyber espionage, and ensuring security of critical maritime routes. Australia and New Zealand, as key geographical members, provide strategic surveillance capabilities for the agreement, for instance, monitoring intelligence activities in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia. The agreement's strength lies in deep technological integration, enabling information sharing across all domains such as cybersecurity, satellite surveillance, and advanced data analysis. Despite the agreement's operational successes, there is a perspective that the Five Eyes Agreement cannot prevent China's hegemony and influence in the Indo-Pacific region, leading America to establish several more significant strategic alliances like Quad and AUKUS. The Quad Alliance or Quadrilateral Dialogue, Quad. This alliance brings together the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, aiming to transform the Indo-Pacific region into a free and open area through the commitment of all four states. These four nations held a mini-congress in Manila, the Philippines' capital, in November 2017, on the sidelines of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, initiating the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which was subsequently abbreviated to Quad. The activities of the Quadrilateral Dialogue are built upon several primary objectives. First, strengthening regional security. Second, developing economic cooperation in areas of climate change, technology, and health security. And third, annual military exercises. These foundations have deepened capabilities among members and strengthened collective defense. These relationships reflect a broader commitment to addressing maritime threats and securing vital sea lanes crucial for global trade and energy supply. Policy toward the Indo-Pacific region manifested in the establishment of the Trilateral AUKUS Alliance. This alliance was announced on September 15, 2021, during a leadership meeting of the three participating nations, attended by President Joe Biden, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. AUKUS, derived from the initial letters of Australia, AU, United Kingdom, UK, and United States, US, represents a new security military framework. Strategic analysts and experts maintain that this alliance constitutes a direct response to China's expansionism and growing military hegemony in the Indo-Pacific region. The cornerstone of this strategic agreement lies in providing nuclear submarine technology to Australia with technical support and assistance from both the United States and Britain, which fundamentally alters the regional power dynamics. The AUKUS alliance members have committed to strengthening joint security and defense capabilities and establishing long-term bilateral relations. Moreover, they have demonstrated readiness for intensified information exchange and advanced defense technology integration. They also emphasized shared values and support for Australia's acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines for its naval forces, aimed at confronting challenges and threats in the new century. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison declared at the press conference that the three nations have elevated their cooperation to a new phase, having always viewed the world from a similar perspective. Morrison emphasized that developments in the Indo-Pacific region are closely linked to the future of all three nations, which operate according to principles such as state sovereignty, rule of law, human rights, and democracy. In response, then British Prime Minister Boris Johnson indicated that AUKUS' primary objective is ensuring security and stability in the Indo-Pacific region, while emphasizing their commitment to acquiring nuclear-powered submarine capabilities for Australia. Similarly, U.S. President Biden emphasized the profound connection between the three nations, stating that this agreement would enhance their security as they enter the 21st century, and cooperation for the Indo-Pacific region would continue not only against current threats but also against potential future challenges and contingencies. The centralization of the U.S. role in the Indo-Pacific region has become imperative, as the regional environment inherently aligns with American objectives and interests. Additionally, the United States pursues several objectives in the region, including preventing the emergence of any dominant power in the region, activating economic factors and maintaining regional economies within the free and open economic system, promoting and supporting the development of a multilateral regional environment, ensuring security and stability for allies and friends, including Japan, Australia, South Korea, and Taiwan, building a network of alliances and bilateral relations, while integrating allied nations through a new regional system, guaranteeing prevention of weapons of mass destruction proliferation, ensuring no additional states acquire ownership, technology, or access to such weapons. U.S. roles and objectives extend beyond these stated points, encompassing additional secondary goals of comparable significance, some of which intersect with the mentioned objectives and are framed within the context of America's overall role. The most significant of these include creating a suitable security environment for resolving the North Korean nuclear crisis, encouraging and activating relations with potentially significant global economic players, such as Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Malaysia, establishing missile defense systems to counter ballistic weapon threats and protect allies, engaging with Japan to maintain its primary role in the region, maintaining operational engagement with Australia and South Korea, further developing bilateral and multilateral strategies, particularly with ASEAN nations. It can be highlighted that the United States has taken significant steps to protect its interests in the Indo-Pacific region through various alliances such as Five Eyes, Quad, and AUKUS. While these alliances operate through different mechanisms, they all revolve around a common objective: countering Chinese hegemony and ascendancy in the region. This multilateral U.S. strategy in the region demonstrates that Washington systematically seeks to maintain its supremacy in an area that could become an arena for international competition in the future. Thanks for watching our channel. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the loop with all our latest videos.